Welcome to the Friday Roundtable for the 2nd of May. I'm Rudyard Griffiths, publisher and co-founder of The Hub. I'm joined by Sean Speer, editor-at-large, fellow co-founder, and Ginny Roth, who's been with us throughout the election and is joining us on today's show. She's a partner at Crestview and one of our key political contributors here at The Hub. Great to have you all on the show today, guys.
Good to be here. You guys catch up on sleep?
A little bit. How about you, Ginny?
Yeah, by now I have. I was feeling it on Tuesday, that's for sure.
I won't tell tales about Sean on election night after we finished our live broadcast, but there were some empty bottles here, Sean, in the Hub office that the staff noticed. And
yeah, I was going to say, let's just say it was a bit of a miracle that that everyone woke up in the morning with their newsletter and my op-ed. If there was any letters or phrases askew, I hope they'll forgive me.
No, it was terrific. You filed that at 5:30 in the morning, and I appreciated reading it when I got up 2 hours later. Sean, let's have you thank our fabulous Hub Fellows that have come on to support our independent journalism this week.
Yeah, we want to particularly thank George R. in Lethbridge, Martin T. in North Vancouver, and Christopher S. in Silver Spring, Maryland, an American, Rudyard, supporting the Hub. Thanks to the three of them and the countless others who've come on board as heroes and fellows over the past several weeks. We're enormously grateful for your support.
Fantastic. Well, guys, on the first half of the show, let's focus on Mark Carney and his government. He gave a press conference this morning, which we're recording shortly after. And then on the back half of the show, where we say goodbye to our complimentary listeners and viewers, let's dig into the future of Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives after this consequential vote on Monday. But to come to you first, Ginny, on Mark Carney and his press conference this morning, we have Parliament coming back on the 26th of May. We have King Charles there to deliver the speech from the throne. How are you gauging the Carney campaign's handling of these few crucial days after the election and just before what sounds like a visit to the White House next week?
Yeah, I have to give him some credit. I think he's handled these last couple of days quite adeptly, including his press conference this morning. I think he's doing two things. One, he's trying to guard against the biggest challenge that I see for him, which is the breadth of his coalition. So he's already fed goodies to both sides. You know, if you think about the centrist folks who might have supported him, I think having the king deliver the speech from the throne is a real nice gesture to those people who kind of like value our history and our roots and our origins. We all may roll our eyes at that, given the Liberal Party's recent history, but you know, I think people will appreciate that. And on the other side of a spectrum, he's sort of doubled down on dental care. He's alluded to further enhancing pharmacare and some of the other programs that I think progressives are looking for from him. So, and then the second thing that I would say is posturally, he does not appear to be avoiding anything. He is jumping into things. He's moving quickly. He's taking action. He's going to see Trump on Tuesday. You know, all of this action comes with risk, and people are used to seeing, I think, in Trudeau, a much more defensive, concerned, keeping his options open style of governance, which is characteristic of a later stage government. And by contrast, Carney seems to have a lot of energy and bullishness, and I think that's going to give him a bit of a honeymoon.
Sean, we know that first contact and then the fog of war. So what happens, Sean, between now and the opening of Parliament? What are you expecting? He's clearly said in the conference today, I thought it was interesting, that he's basically going to take as long as he needs and the country needs to work out this agreement with the Americans, or to have these negotiations. I shouldn't even get ahead of myself to say necessarily that, you know, this ends in an agreement. What do you think of that positioning? What is he doing by telegraphing now that this could be long? I think he indicated almost that it would be torturous, that it would be on again, off again, up and down. I mean, is this what Canadians expected?
Yeah, I think there's so much to say in response to this press conference. I'll come to that question in a minute, I promise. But to Ginny's observations, Rudyard, one of the outstanding questions in my mind is what is going to be the center of gravity of Mark Carney's government, given the breadth of his coalition? I mean, one way to think of it, he has on one end of the spectrum Bay Street capitalists who like Mark Carney's command of economics and his background in the private sector, and and who voted Liberal. On the other hand, you have the 25 or 50% of traditional NDP supporters who he brought into his coalition. And so the outstanding question has always been, how will he hold it together? I think what we saw in this press conference is the benefit of his seriousness, his individual or personal seriousness. He looked like someone who was in command and in control, which, as you both know, is 3/4 of the battle. But as Ginny says, I think he nodded in different directions, talking about the importance of controlling spending, of controlling immigration, nods to the right edge of his coalition. On the other hand, he talked about the expansion of entitlement programs like dental care and pharmacare and all the rest. So this dance, guys, between these different parts of his coalition will be crucial, I think, to understanding a Carney government. On the Canada-US file, similarly, I think reflected a seriousness, a kind of competence, which is really going to be core, I think, to how he wants to present himself and the government to Canadians. I think the point about trying to manage expectations is crucial. I think there's going to be a series of steps along the way here, guys, to ultimately socialize Canadians to what an eventual deal looks like. In a moment where people are feeling elbows up, it's going to involve some big compromises. And I think what we saw today was the first in a series of markers bringing the public along to an eventual deal in the country's interests.
Yeah. So, Ginny, some other parts of this press conference I thought was interesting. You know, a kind of law and order message, hiring 1,000 RCMP officers, moving against, bail provisions for repeat offenders. Further to Sean's point, I mean, you've been in politics a while. How do you straddle when the range in that coalition is so big? You have 50% of NDP voters traditionally broke for Mark Carney. You have, a lot of urban voters probably who have more progressive as opposed to liberal views. And here he is with these hard messages, frankly, on crime. I'm not so sure, Sean, the message on immigration was that hard. Reducing temporary visas in Canada to 5% of our entire population of 40 million people is not exactly, a major curtailment of migration inflows into the country. But Ginny, to you on that point, there seems like he's trying to have his cake and eat it too right now. How long can that go on for?
Yeah. I mean, on both those files, on immigration and on public safety, I think there was more lip service than there was substance. If you look at the crime file, a lot of that's local. A lot of it's around drug policy. Unless you see safe injection sites and safe supply, so-called, start to fade into the background, unless you see urban police feeling more empowered to enforce the law, particularly in public places like parks, et cetera. I don't know that sense of public disorder is going to go away in those urban centers. As an aside, there's so much to dig into about the election results, but the success of the Conservatives in downtown Toronto, a lot of which didn't just come from the Liberal, from the collapse of the NDP, is really interesting to me and maybe speaks to some of that urban public disorder. So all that to say, I think he felt he needed to check the box on both immigration and crime to sort of present a well-rounded version of himself to his new coalition. I don't know that he's all that serious about pursuing actual solutions in those areas.
Mm-hmm.
And he can for now make an argument that it takes time. And I think he will have some time, but eventually the public will want results, and those will be, I think, some challenge areas for him.
Sean, to come back to you, there was a part of, again, we're really reading the tea leaves here, but he talked in French in one of his answers about Canada's three peoples, French, English, Aboriginal. This was an answer to why the king was invited and why he's giving the speech on the throne. I don't know. I grab onto that and think maybe there's something a little more traditional here, a presentation of the national government, of national identity that is founded in these older kind of archetypes. Again, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, Sean, but a feeling like he was shearing off some of the identity politics and the somewhat slavish obedience of the Trudeau government to this, rainbow coalition that, and all these different and acronyms and phraseology that the previous prime minister so scrupulously used on every single instance to describe the country.
Yeah, I emphasized in my first answer, his seriousness and his presence, and maybe it's worth elaborating a bit on that, because I think it gets to something you're alluding to, Rudyard. Like Prime Minister Trudeau had charisma. There's no doubt about it, but he didn't convey, in my mind, a true executive, someone who gave people confidence that he knew his brief, that he had a clear command over the governing agenda, and that he was in effect in control. I don't think there's any doubt, whatever one thinks of Mark Carney, that he is not going to be in control of this government. And part of that, Rudyard, part of that seriousness, it seems to me, means that he's going to have less time for some of these tangential or symbolic issues that animate parts of his progressive base. He is focused on issues like energy and climate and the economy, and no doubt those come with their own trade-offs. Don't get me wrong; we'll no doubt have plenty to say over the coming weeks and months about his choices on those files. But you get the sense that he's arriving in politics with a theory of the case that doesn't involve some of those issues that were so core to Justin Trudeau's political identity. I guess the outstanding question, to come back to an emerging theme of this conversation, which is really about how he manages this coalition, how many of those voters will want to hear and see more from him on what you might characterize as identity politics?
Yeah.
Well, we did, Rudyard, just if I could quickly
Yeah.
add it, we did see a source of his inform the public through the Globe and Mail that he planned to have a gender equitable cabinet, which I thought was noteworthy. I mean, I think I'd hoped that maybe he would take the approach that I would prefer for a more traditional liberal, which is just make your cabinet, make it diverse because you've recruited a diverse group of candidates, make it clear that people are there on merit, and then let people observe what they will about the diversity of your cabinet. And don't start from working back from a place of quotas, which is sort of definite how you would think about the new version of progressive obsessive identity politics. And so that makes me wonder the extent to which there are people in Carney's inner circle
Yes.
who are constantly grappling with these questions
Yes.
of how do we, just as in the early days of the Trudeau government, how do we negotiate between these two forces? And we know where Trudeau ultimately ended up. I don't
Yes.
know that we know where Carney's going to end up yet, but there's no question some of those forces exist within his circle of trust that are sort of pushing him constantly in that direction.
Remember, guys, the platform did have that appendix indicating that, that it had undergone a gender bias analysis, and it provided that analysis. So again, I think there is a kind of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde kind of tension here that runs through the Carney campaign and runs through the platform. Sean, to come to you before we go to break, I noted in this press conference, I tried to use my Ontario high school French. I think it was good enough. No mention of the word pipeline. Lots of talk about infrastructure and large-scale investment on the part of government. That makes me a little bit nervous about government picking winners here. But what's going on here? Pipelines were a huge part of this campaign. He talked about pipelines early in the campaign, less as the campaign went on. But should we take the absence of that word in this press conference today as indicative that maybe some people's hopes, some people's expectations with regards to hydrocarbons and their ability to hit tidewater somewhere in Canada other than the West Coast is a quickly receding dream?
Yeah, was it Keith Davey, Rudyard, who famously said they can have the West, we'll take the rest? That kind of is reflected in the post-election Liberal caucus, isn't it? This is a caucus that is over-indexed for Quebec MPs, and frankly, notwithstanding the spin, had a disappointing night in the Prairie provinces. It had greater ambitions around the number of seats that it would pick up, particularly in the province of Alberta.
And BC. I think it was disappointing for the Liberals in BC.
Exactly. So when you just think of that composition, regional overlaid over the kind of broader ideological tensions which we've been talking about so far, one can't help but think that he will be less inclined to take on some risk within his party when it comes to making the case for and ultimately advancing traditional oil and gas pipelines. I think he'll be emphasizing the clean part of his framing of a clean energy superpower, and that, of course, will come with its own challenges, particularly in a world in which Albertans are feeling both disappointed with the result, but I think also affirmed by the fact that the province again overwhelmingly voted conservative, and in that sense, I think has a greater degree of unity about how it feels about these issues and how it feels about Mark Carney's incoming government.
Last word for you in this segment. Let's talk, Ginny, about what happens in the coming weeks here. We have the big visit, Carney, on Tuesday. What does a government need to do? Should we expect a cabinet to be sworn in next week? Is that something that will happen later in the month? Then he's into this short session. Any ideas of what happens like in that session? What is the primary business that he's going to undertake? And then I assume a summer break as per usual, the end of June.
Yeah, I think we're going to get a cabinet soon. Probably not next week, but the week after, early the following week. And we'll be off to the races. I think he's very eager to get the House back, get legislation passed, and get his agenda moving. And the summer, like this excuse for a summer sitting, or a spring sitting, I suppose, gives him a chance to show a lot of progress before he gives his people a break in July and August. And then, in the fall, they can come back with a lot of progress having been made. He can continue to spend time in the background talking to Trump. I think Trump, just because I haven't commented on it yet, I think conservatives tied ourselves in knots trying to figure out what the Canadian public rationally wanted in terms of our relationship with the US and with Donald Trump. And I think what Carney understood was that the Canadians wanted an emotional response, and then they wanted a predictability and calm. And even though that sounds incoherent, because it's like, well, how could you want elbows up and then also want a deal? Which I think many of us were sort of saying to ourselves. I think Carney realized that incoherence didn't matter. And he can kind of breeze past that and now get to what Canadians really want, which is a deal. And so far, from what we're hearing from Trump, it'll be challenging. There'll be concessions we have to make, but it seems like Trump, posturally anyway, is ready to start to have a conversation. So I think that is the biggest area for demonstrable success. Now the bar's low. We're in a barely fraught dynamic with them right now, and so even in the slightest improvement, I think on that will look like progress.
Yeah. Just on the subject of posture, can I weigh in for 1 minute? The only other thing that we'd be remiss if we didn't address rather quickly is how Mark Carney will confront Parliament itself. There's been ongoing speculation about whether we may see some floor crossings, whether we might see some type of formal or informal arrangement from the New Democrats. Yeah. You do get the sense that he feels like he's in a strong position. And he is going to dare the NDP to vote against him, and for all intents and purposes will function like he has a majority government. I think that's probably a safe bet, possibly for a long time.
Yeah, he emphatically ruled out today any kind of coalition, informal or formal, with the NDP. Well, let's say goodbye, guys, to our complimentary audience watching this on the Hub's YouTube channel and on our general podcast feed. If you enjoy these conversations and you want smart, civil, substantive reflection on Canadian politics, sign up for a Hub Heroes subscription. It's only $1 a week, one of the best deals going. You get all of our best content on our website, along with the entire back half of the Hub Roundtable and our much-loved program In Conversation with David Frum. So sign up now at www.thehub.ca. A quick goodbye, and then hello again to our donors and subscribers.